It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hola, soy Phil Ferguson, y este es el programa de Phil Ferguson. Yes, hello everybody, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Just wanted to give a little practice to my nascent Spanish speaking skills. After 12 years of learning Italian, I'm starting on Spanish, so we'll see how that goes. I figured that might be pretty darn handy in Central Florida. Other fun news, I did survive my cruise with the Central Florida Freethinker Society Community. Oh my God, I can't even do that name right. And the funny thing is, we went on a cruise, my wife and I, with the group 4 years ago, long before we moved to Florida, and had nothing to do with the organizers, but my wife and I decided that we were not cruise people, and we would probably never, ever do a cruise again. But this cruise, which came up and was reasonably affordable, and keynote speaker was Aaron Ra, good friend of mine, friend of the show, and we now know quite a few people here in the Orlando area that were going to be on the cruise, and some other good friends from around the country that were going to be on the cruise. And we thought, well, it won't be too awful if we've got a bunch of friends with us, right? So how bad could it go? But it was a totally different experience. We loved it. I don't know what's different. I guess I do know what's different. A couple of things. The first cruise we did years ago was on one of the smallest cruise boats available. And this was a pretty good size one. I think the capacity of guests and crew combined, the maximum was 5,999 persons. So I don't know how short we were of that, but there were a lot of people, a lot of places to eat for free. The food as a whole was really good to fantastic. There were a few misses, but that's bound to happen. The biggest miss for me was the French onion soup. That was horrible. Absolutely, every way you could possibly think of a French onion soup going bad, it was wrong in all those ways, but yet they still delivered it to us when we asked for it. So only made that mistake one time. They had a gelateria with actual gelato. It wasn't ice cream pretending to be gelato, and it wasn't gelato that was frozen and therefore ruined. It was really good. And our tickets included all you could drink alcohol, up to $15 a serving. So if a double was too much, you could get a single and another single at the same time, because they would give you two. It's for you and another person. You could get two drinks at the same time and then come back and get two more drinks. There were some bars that were really big and were like crazy packed, but if you were looking around the boat and paid attention, there was a lot of small bars that were open that had only one bartender, but only 4 or 5 people sitting at that bar. So it was real cozy. And like I said, 5 or 6 places you could eat for free. Another half dozen to 10 places you could pay extra to eat at. So the free drink thing, right? So I have issues. And one of them is, of course, with money, which is probably part of the reason I ended up with money, is because I have this, love-hate psychotic relationship with money. But here, everything was already paid for. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, my God, how much did I pay for all this alcohol? I better drink a lot of it. So they had regular drinks, they had frozen drinks, White Russians, daiquiris, margaritas, shots of tequila, pina coladas. And the problem is a lot of the drinks that I like are sugary. And being a type 2 diabetic, that's not a good idea. But I don't know. It was kind of one of those things where I'm like, I'm on a cruise. The rules don't apply. And it's already paid for. So from the very beginning of the cruise and for the next 3 days on top of that, so 4 days in total out of the 7, I drank more alcohol in 4 days than I probably have drank in the last 4 years. And then it hit me. Then there was a price to pay. And from my knees down, my legs, ankles, feet, all of a sudden decided to retain water. And everything swelled up. It was painful to walk. And at one moment I turned to my wife and I said, well, what do you think? Was it the sugars from all the sugar and candy and cakes and food that we ate? Was it the salt that's in everything? And especially the margaritas, which have the nice, lovely salted rim. Or what was it, the alcohol? And she just looked at me and she said, yes. So 4 days of eat and drink like crazy came to a sudden stop. And so I decided to eat a little bit more responsibly, eat less, try to get more vegetables. And within 36 hours, I guess, the swelling had gone away. And I was not in the mood to drink anymore. So no more free drinks. The only thing that bothered me was that our free alcohol did not include drinks with caffeine. So you couldn't get a coffee or Red Bull or anything like that unless you paid extra for it. And there were people that had that in their package. I didn't know. I didn't look. I didn't think I'd be wanting any of those because I would just get the alcohol. So next cruise, if I have a choice, I probably just will not get a drink package because then I just won't drink a lot of alcohol. The water's fine. If you are careful, you can take in a bottle to the free cafe where you can get food morning, noon, and night. I mean, it closes overnight for cleaning, I'm pretty sure, but it's open a lot. And you can go get juices and stuff and fill your bottle. They don't want you to fill it at the station, so you'd have to get 2 or 3 glassfuls of water or orange juice or whatever, and then you could fill up your own bottle and carry it around with you. The water out of the sink was potable, drinkable, and was pretty good. So there's all that. But we went to St. Thomas. We went to the U.S. Virgin Islands. We went to the British Virgin Islands, and then we stopped in Bahamas, where the Norwegian cruise line owns an island, and that's the island we stopped at, their island, and it was very nice. A lot of adventures, and the funny thing is, I think for me, one of the fondest memories will be the one land excursion that should not have happened. I think it was on the British Virgin Islands. There was storms, and as we're driving in this kind of bus with no walls, it's got a roof. I think it was like a tent fabric. What do they call that? Maybe it'll come to me. But so water eventually starts leaking through it. Water's coming in the sides from the rain, and it poured and it poured and it poured. And the first stop we were supposed to get out, everyone decided, no, we're just not going to get out. There was a little break in the heavy rain at the top of one of the mountains, and we went out to get the scenic 360-degree view, but it was foggy and cloudy everywhere, and you couldn't see anything. And then we went down to a beach, and the sun came out a little bit, and when everyone was getting back on the bus, we asked the tour guide, hey, can we go back up on the mountain, which, incidentally, we were going to drive almost right past it because now we were on the opposite side of the island from where our cruise ship is. So we drove back up there. Still wasn't perfect views, but it was way better. So got the great views, but just kind of this camaraderie developed with the, 15 or 16 people on that bus because of kind of not only our adventure together or our trials and tribulations, or maybe it was the rum samples that we got when we stopped at a distillery, or maybe it was the drink or two we had on the beach, or maybe now it was sunny. So we just had a hoot the last hour of that ride. So that was great fun. Saw a lot of neat things, a lot of great places. I had already mentioned on the cruise ship, the food and the restaurants were fantastic. The shows were great. Like I said, the cruise we took 4 years ago, there was a comedian. We saw 2 comedians here, both fantastic. On the other cruise, we saw a couple shows. They were shows. I'm assuming that the bigger boats can book bigger, better people and pay the bills, whereas a really small boat can only afford people who would take a really small fee. So maybe there's a quality issue there. There was also a lot more space to walk around. And one of the reasons I had convinced myself I could eat so much food and drink so much alcohol is I was getting in huge steps. My normal target is 6,000 a day, which I know is not particularly high, but on the boat, 10, 12, 15,000, because I'm exploring all the places. I'm doing laps around deck 8, and then I go back and forth on deck 7. Then I go up to 16, and then 17, and then 19. Just exploring the boat, having a great time. So I thought that was going to counteract the food more than it did, but put on a total of 5 pounds. By the way, 5 pounds, and not like my Italian vacations where I lose weight by walking around. This one, I guess the food was just too ever present, too easy, and way too rich. More of an American diet than an Italian diet. So got to figure out how to get rid of those 5 pounds. Anywho, in this show, got a lot coming up, and I'm going to keep the rest of this opening short because I did catch a little cold. Not COVID, at least not so far. I've tested negative twice, but did get a little cold on the last day of the ship. But we're going to have some segments here talking about expense ratios, what they mean, what they don't mean. A little follow-up and or warning about gains and cost basis and tracking the date that you bought things. It's something that a lot of investors don't know about. And for a lot of my clients, they don't need to know about it because I'll take care of that kind of stuff. But with the transfer from TD Ameritrade to Schwab last September, there's some odd stuff going on. And it probably won't affect almost all of you, but 1 or 2 people it might. So listen to that if you want to know more about how cost basis and lots work, particularly if you are a client of Polaris and we're at TD Ameritrade and now you're at Schwab. There might be room for some potential problems. So listen to that. If you think that you fit in that category, let me know and we can sit down and go over what problems may or may not exist in your holdings and in relationship to their costs and their purchase dates. You'll understand more once you go through the show. A quick segment on a new ETF called MUSQ or MUSQ, MUSQ. I'm getting buried with emails and people wanting me to sell all kinds of things, but that fund in particular. So I thought I would learn a little bit more about it and tell you what it does and doesn't do. And no surprise, spoiler alert, don't put any money in it. That was easy. And then a brief follow-up discussion on something that has been talked about in the last year or two, tips and commodities, and how a lot of people rushed into them as a hedge against inflation. And my position then, as it is now, is that only works if you're before every other idiot. But odds are, by the time you hear something is a good idea, it's a time you should place money into it, and you change your plan or ignore your plan or don't have a plan, and you hop into something that's now hot and trendy because everyone's doing it. Guess what? You're late. You're late to the party, and you're not going to be protected and or you're not going to make money. And that's kind of what happened to a lot of people that rushed into tips and or commodities. I said a couple of years ago, the best hedge against inflation is stocks because they have nice, high, solid returns. And if you think companies are increasing prices just to make more profits, not because of supply and demand issues, but simply to make more money, well, then that will be reported that their profits go up and the price of their stocks will go up. So if that's what companies are doing, and I think there's an argument to be made that they have, and maybe they still are, but if companies make more profits, your portfolio goes up, which is really sucky if you have no portfolio. So that's a whole nother problem. But if you're an investor, if you have money in stocks, if companies are artificially raising prices and therefore they make more profits, the price of your stocks go up and you make money because you're an owner in these companies that maybe are ripping off average consumers. Anywho, gonna take a quick break, get on with all the good stuff, and I'll see you, 30, 40, 50 minutes from now for some closing thoughts. Don't go anywhere.
My mom is very religious, and she said, whatever you think about all the time, that's what you worship. Oh. If that's the case, I'd like everyone to pop open their Diet Coke cans and turn to page 37, Other People magazines. In this holy scripture, we read the parable of Miss Valerie Bertinelli. Once on television, then lost to pop culture. Now welcome back into the zeitgeist again, and the worst dressed shall be the best dressed, and the best dressed shall be the worst dressed.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This is a little segment on expense ratios, and it is inspired by an email from, let's see here, AD, I'm just going to give the initials, a couple of topics that came up in this, and this is from a couple of months ago, and I'm just trying to clean up old emails. So if you've emailed me in the last few months and I've not responded, please feel free to do so again. But just following up on this, questions about expense ratios. And one of them was when and how is the expense ratio taken out? So before I even let me just answer that directly. Continuously, every day. If the expense ratio is 1%, 1% divided by 360 days, whatever business days probably. But yes, daily, continuously, regularly, and it's not taken out at one specific date because it would allow people to own the fund for the whole year and then get out at the last minute and not pay the expense ratio. So it's there all the time. And one of the nice things for a person that gets paid by a mutual fund company when they sell you something, you don't see it because it comes out every day in a small amount. There's no report on your statement that says $5 today, $5 this day, $5 this day, $5 this day. And that's one disadvantage a fee-based advisor like myself, like Polaris Financial Planning, might experience in a marketing sense. If a fee-based advisor charges you 1% or 1/4 of that every quarter, you're going to get a statement and you're going to see that number. And you might think, hey, I'm paying this one person this money and the other person I'm not. You are. You're paying it. It's just much harder to see. And a lot of times the industry likes those things. So that's one question. How important is the expense ratio? Pretty darn important. And it's a matter of scale. And the author of the email had a really salient point. You get to a point of diminishing returns. There are a lot of mutual funds. I think last time I researched this, average mutual fund expense ratios might be 1.3% or 1.5%. But it's only that high because a handful, a portion, I don't know what percentage, but there are some mutual fund companies that just say, fuck it, nobody's looking, and they charge 2 or 3 or even more % per year to manage the mutual fund. So this may be how they start, or they may start with a reasonable expense ratio and then over time realize that they can just raise the expense ratio and people don't take money out. So they just keep doing that. And each and every time they raise the expense ratio, they just make more money, more profits, because nothing changes. It's just going forward. So that is a very tempting business model for a mutual fund company. And one of the reasons I don't like new or upstart mutual fund companies is if you put your money in there and Yeah, maybe it makes money, but then the expense ratios start to crank up. If you decide that that's a crappy fund and you want to get out of it and it's in a taxable account, you might have to sell it and create a tax consequence for yourself to get lower expenses in the future. So that's one of the reasons I like and I defer to Vanguard, which has a almost 50-year track record of low expenses and lowering expenses and keeping expenses down. However, I have mentioned in past episodes, there are things that Vanguard has done in the last decade that I don't like. So it's not like they're golden and can do no wrong. They do things I don't like, but compared to everyone else that I've looked at, they're my favorite. And another thing is that people don't often know, and there's a nice article at the website called Investopedia, which I highly recommend that you poke around. Amazing stuff that you can learn there. The title of this one that I'm looking at right now on my screen, Are Mutual Fund Performance Numbers Reported Net of Fees? Well, the short of that is yes, of course that they are net of fees. And a regular warning that I give, if you pull up a mutual fund and get a nice little graph or chart, same thing with a stock, and you look at it over time, you're only seeing the price and you're not getting the dividends. You need to go to a website that you can trust that will report the percentages with dividends. But yes, it will always be net of fees. They will come out. They get paid. They always get paid, and they always get paid by you. The next common misunderstanding is that you can look up a mutual fund's expense ratio. That does not include everything that you as the investor might pay to own that mutual fund. This is very important for you to understand. The published expense ratio includes the items that are legally required to be disclosed and included as part of the expense ratio. Anything else is not reported in that bucket. A couple of big examples. There's a thing called a 12B1 fee, which is an additional fee, an additional expense that you pay as the investor that likely is not reported in the expense ratio. Some companies include it, some don't, but they don't have to. It's a separate category. And that 12B1 fee, theoretically, is a higher fee that you pay so that the company can sell more shares and pay commissions to people, to brokers, to advisors to sell more shares so that you eventually save money with a lower expense ratio as the fund goes to scale. It doesn't work out that way, but it's fun to think that it might. Other things that will definitely not be included in the expense ratios are things like broker fees, transaction fees, trading fees. The expense ratio doesn't include any losses because of what is known as the spread. Often when an item, a stock, or a bond is sold on the market, the amount that's paid by the buyer is slightly higher than the amount that's received by the seller. And that's called the spread. Also, the bid-ask prices. And the brokerage firm that's handling that transaction takes the difference. Now, it's not necessarily bad that they're taking the difference because they're not doing it for free. No one does this shit for free. There's always costs. It's just whether you know about them or not, and are they reasonable or not. And if you buy things that aren't traded very often, the spread can be bigger. And this is one of the potential downsides I've talked about with ETFs. And it's a very sensitive point, particularly with clients of mine that have moved from TD Ameritrade to Schwab. The Schwab price for buying and or selling shares or dollar amounts of a Vanguard index fund is $45. You could buy the virtually equivalent version of many of those funds as ETFs and pay something like $10. But when you pay the $10 brokerage fee, there is also a spread factor. So you might pay a few pennies more when you buy it, and you might pay a few pennies less when you sell it, or you get a few pennies less when you sell it. And those differences on the front and back end might eat up the $35 you thought you saved. This is particularly true with larger accounts because the spread applies to every share. So if you buy only a couple of shares and the price is a few pennies and you can pay $10 instead of $45, all right, you might have an argument. I do think you might be getting to the point where you're trying to squeak out an extra $10 or $15 or $20 that might not be worth it, but it might be. It's up to you to decide. Of course, companies that have higher turnover. We've talked about turnover. Maybe it's not been recently, but mutual funds with high turnover, especially if they're doing stock investing, if they have 100% turnover, what are they really doing? Are they playing a game? Are all of their decisions so shitty that they have to sell and replace 100% of the stocks that they bought just months ago that they were convinced were great investments? What happened? I mean, that's not long-term investing. I'm not particularly interested in that kind of rapid turnover. And I've talked about shitty funds and super shitty funds that have 200, 300, 400% turnover for stocks because they're doing something really creative. And maybe it works out, but I don't like it. I get scared. I want classic, old school buy and hold, not because it's necessarily the best way, although it probably is, but it's because I know that it works. Something new may or may not work. There's so many things that come along every few months, every few days, every year that promises to be the best new thing. And in most of them aren't the best new thing. They're just crap. And it's a way to take money from you. So there's that. There's also a possible load, which would not be included in the expense ratio. And I think the legal maximum for a front-end load is 8.5%. So if you invest $100,000, the company is going to take $8,500 right off the top. So you have to make 8.5 and a little bit more just to get back to where you started. That's a buzzkill. 8.5%, even 5.5 or 3.75%. That's going to take a while to get past. And is that fund going to have performance that is better than the index? Odds are, history says, no, they are not. You can get a fund that has no front-end load, but has a continuous load, is what they call it. That's usually C shares of a fund. So if you own a mutual fund and out at the end, the far end of the name, there's just a letter floating out there. There's no legal requirement or system what letters they have to use. There's some industry conventions that most people follow. If it has an A, it's usually a front-end load. If it has a C, it's usually a back-end load where you pay to get out. And then very common also is B. And B generally means what they would call a continuous load. That might be 0.25%. It might be a whole percent that comes out of the fund again every day. And it generally goes to the advisor, but it goes to the company, whether you see it or not. And if you ask a salesperson, well, how much do you make? Or what am I paying you on this? They might in their own head think, honestly, you're not paying me anything. The company pays me. Yeah, the company pays you with your own money. The other thought real quick about the transaction fee at Schwab, the $45 to buy or sell a mutual fund, a Vanguard index fund. There are tens of thousands of mutual funds that you can buy and sell at Schwab and not pay the $45, at least not pay the $45 directly. Now, that excites a lot of people because they say, wow, I was paying $45 and now I'm paying $0. Well, Schwab doesn't do that for free suddenly for some mutual fund companies. What happens is those mutual fund companies, they agree to pay the money you're not paying. So it looks like $0 to you. But that money comes out of the mutual fund company. And that's another expense, by the way, that won't be in the expense ratio. But it does pull down the return that you're going to make in that fund. Another thing that is nice with Vanguard funds, you pay the fee, and if you don't jump around, you don't pay any more fees. If you buy a fund that has a lot of people jumping in and out for whatever reason, all of that is consumed and eaten by the mutual fund, and they pay that to Schwab in the case of a client for Polaris. And that reduces your overall performance, but you don't see the $45 charge. You can pay 2, 5, 10 times more money because other people are jumping in and out of that fund. People are less likely to jump in and out of Vanguard funds because of the type of customer that they attract and that little bit of pain of paying that $45. I think I've covered the most of it. There could be other things, but so the expense ratio is important, but there's other expenses. And when the expense ratio gets down below 0.2%, 0.1%, diminishing returns and other costs that you don't see are probably more relevant than a further reduction of the expense ratio. There are some funds by companies like Vanguard, or not the Vanguard, Fidelity and Schwab, where they have a few funds that have 0% expense ratio. So they don't charge you anything to manage the fund, but they still have trading costs, transaction costs. I don't think those funds have 12B1 fees, but there's other fees and expenses that get there. And of course, there's the overall efficiency of how the fund is run, what the turnover is like. So you could end up in a possibility that even though the expense ratio is very slightly lower, that the performance is also slightly lower, even though there's no expense ratio. So there's that. The other thing in the email, very, very thoughtful, very intuitive. In international funds, there are 2 funds that I use for large cap growth and large cap value from Vanguard that are technically not index funds. Those are the only 2 funds that I generally use that are not index funds. And they have expense ratios around 0.35. Not the 0.1% that you would have for a domestic or lower index fund, but trading international stocks involves some more stuff, more expenses. It's harder to do. They're technically not index funds, but Vanguard runs them very efficiently, and 0.35% on an international fund is about as low as you're going to get. One could buy the Vanguard Total International Stock Index and pay a lower expense ratio, probably something close to 0.1%. But what I'm hoping to accomplish is having a variety of investments that possibly you can rebalance from time to time, 6 months, 2 years, whatever it takes. And that creates a little advantage that every once in a while you get a little bit better return because you're selling from one that's higher and putting money in the one that's lower. Does that actually work out in that specific case with the international large cap growth and value? I don't know, to be honest. I'd like to think that it does. And if someone can think of a way I can figure that out, maybe I can do some model runs and see if it works out. But I like to think that it does. And even if it doesn't, it could create the possibility that in a given year, just like domestic stocks have variability, and that'll be a whole other segment, you might find that international growth goes up 18% and international value goes up 4%. And if you need to take money out, or if you're adding money, you add to the one that's underperformed and you take out from the one that's overperformed. If something like that happens once every few years, you're going to benefit far greater than the extra 0.2% that you're paying to have those over just the total international index, in my opinion. Anyway, that's some thoughts about expense ratios, how they work, what's included. And again, you can go to Investopedia. The article I was looking at, are mutual fund performance numbers reported net of fees? Yes. But what are all those fees? And the article does a nice job detailing all of that. So that's some information on expense ratios.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Jesus had a tough life. Boy, I read about that guy. Jesus is the only guy that ever came back from the dead that didn't scare the fuck out of everybody, man. He's the only guy that ever crawled out of a grave where people didn't go, oh, I just saw some fucker crawl out of his grave. Jesus comes back. He doesn't get any pressure. No static. Nobody's upset. He climbs out. He's walking around. Nobody's upset. They can eat with him and everything. You know? It's like, isn't that guy dead? Yeah, but he's real stubborn, man. He won't accept it. Pass the butter. What are they staring at? Yeah, I read it, folks. I read that book. He's on the cross. 30, 40 Christians standing around going, it's a shame that he has to die. And Jesus is going, well, maybe I wouldn't have to. Somebody get a ladder and a pair of pliers. I don't know if Jesus has actually spoken in an audible voice to anybody in about 2,000 years, folks. I think his last words may have been, oh, not the other one, oh, you jerk, no. It may have been his last words, I'm not sure. Yeah, people say, you think Jesus is coming back? Sure. What's it been, 2,000 years? Boy, I sure don't want to dampen anybody's optimism here. It's only 2,000 fucking years. Yeah, he's coming back. He's going to do game shows. They're going to go, Jesus, this is your life. Remember this noise? Yeah. All right, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Give me a second. He's up in heaven right now. They're going, why don't you go back down to earth? Be a symbol of peace and love to the world. Help. And he's going, yeah, sure. Help, huh? Yeah, I'd like to help. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can play the piano again. Thanks a lot. I mean, the only savior that can use his hand is a fucking whistle.
Got a quick little segment here, and this is post-cruise is when I'm recording this, so hopefully I don't cough. I'll try to keep it cool. I did get a cold. Not COVID, at least. I've tested twice, and it's not COVID. Just hopefully a normal old-fashioned cold from being around several thousand people in a confined space. It was fun, but that's another whole other segment. What I want to talk about today is something very specific, and it might affect a few more of the clients, customers of Polaris Financial Planning. It might affect you even if you're not a customer, and it might affect you for other reasons that you haven't thought about. So anyway, the whole topic here is cost basis data, cost basis prices, and cost basis dates. So if you were at TD Ameritrade and your money moved over to Schwab, or if at any time you moved money from one place to another place, it's something that is often overlooked, but you want to take a look at it. You might want to learn more about how this works. You want to make sure that the data associated with the things that you own is correct. Let me give you an example. If you bought a stock for $55 and then sold it for $100, you clearly made $55 of gains per share. If you've owned it for less than a year, it's short-term gains. If you've owned it longer than a year, it's long-term gains. Long-term gains tax rates currently in this time period are lower, so you want, if possible, to have more long-term gains and fewer short-term gains depending on your situation. So I think I talked about this briefly once, and now I've learned it's a little more unfortunate and complicated than I expected. When the accounts from TD Ameritrade Institutional went to Schwab Institutional, if the TD Ameritrade accounts did not have good cost basis or purchase date data, Schwab put in 0 for the cost basis, and they put in September 1st of 2023 for the original purchase date. And this just caused me and one of my clients a bunch of fuckery. And now both of us are going to have to spend a lot of time to fix it. So why this is a problem. If you had that stock that you paid $55 for and sold for $100, let's say you bought it 3 years ago when your account was at TD Ameritrade, but now your account is at Schwab. For whatever reason, TD Ameritrade didn't have the cost basis data. Very unlikely, but it could happen. So Schwab, instead of working with you to try to figure out what the correct cost should be, it defaults to 0. So if your cost basis was really 55, but now it's showing 0, when you sell those shares, you do not have a $45 gain. You have a $100 gain. So you would have to pay taxes on $100 of gains, not $45 in gains. Are you feeling me? You going along with this? Now, of course, you could always file your taxes whatever way you want and say, hey, no, my gain was only $45 per share, not $100, and then you would calculate and pay your tax based on that. However, if you get audited, you would want to have some documentation to show the price you paid. And quite honestly, I don't want to have that discussion with the IRS. I want to get that cost to be loaded correctly at Schwab or whatever custodian that you use before I sell anything, so I don't even have the problem that I would have to explain to the IRS later. I don't want to explain a fucking thing. I want the statement, the 1099 that I get from Schwab or any other company to be correct, and I use that to file my taxes because that's what the IRS is going to look at. So something you can do, no matter where your account is held, is go look and make sure that every item you own and every lot for that item. So you could have bought some stock for $55 and then 3 days later bought it for $60. Those two transactions are separate lots, L-O-T-S for plural, lots. If you're lucky and your custodian has a cost basis tab, you should be able to expand on all the items you look at to see all of the individual lots, purchase lots, and you should be able to see all the prices you paid for everything back 10, 20, 30, 40 years if you're so lucky. If any of them show a cost basis of 0, you will want to fix that. You really want to fix that before you sell it, not afterwards. That's just my advice. Now, the specific case that I had here is someone had money at company X. No, let's not use X because of the social media. Company R. And it went from company R to TD Ameritrade. Well, almost always when you move accounts, when you move investments, when you move holdings or transfer, the company that used to have the account, in this case, company R, will send over all of the lot information. When you bought it, what you paid for it, each and every transaction. And that would have gone to TD Ameritrade. Well, in this case, it didn't go to TD Ameritrade. We didn't notice. I didn't notice. And then it went to Schwab. So Schwab said there's no data there. And so as a default, what they chose to do, and it would have been really nice if they made this clear to me. Maybe they did in something that I missed, but I don't think they did. If they don't have cost basis data, everything is assumed to be 0. If they don't have a purchase date, everything is assumed to be 9/1 of 23. So no matter where you have your accounts, you want to look at all of the lot level detail and make sure there is an accurate purchase price, and particularly not a 0 price for anything you've bought over the last several decades if you have been investing that long. You want to make sure that the cost basis is not 0. There are some rare exceptions that a $0 cost basis is the correct amount, but generally it is not. Once you know what you need to fix, the challenge is, how does one fix it? Well, if you're lucky and you have paper statements, and this is a reason for me to tell you to have paper statements, you can go in your file cabinet and find where you originally bought those items 12 years ago and that statement will have the price on it, and you can do a cost basis purchase price update with Schwab. They're pretty good at it. You send them the information, they change the data. Not really their problem, because if you give them the wrong data and it results in you overpaying or underpaying your taxes, still not Schwab's problem. So you send them some reasonably good reason why the price should not be zero and it should be some other dollar amount, they will fix it. Just try to make sure you have the right number. If there's no way for you to know what you actually paid for something, maybe you have an idea of when it was bought and you can guesstimate an original purchase price. And this falls back to what would a reasonable person calculate as the purchase price for that item. So, and of course, for tax purposes, you're going to want to maintain documentation for how in the fuck you came up with that price. I don't know how you're going to come up with it, but if you have owned the stock for 10 years and you know that you bought it in 2014 and you think it was maybe the summer, you go look at that stock, and if it price went up and down during the year, but in the summer it was, a certain price, you can do a screenshot of that graph, the webpage you're looking at, and say, this is what I looked up, this is the price that I think is fair, and this is the price that I used. So if you ever get audited, you have a backup for that price. The thing that caused extra problems today was not only the $0 prices, which we had already fixed in this account, did not pay enough attention. And I'm going to own this myself. I did not pay enough attention to some of the individual items having an acquisition or original purchase or opening purchase date of 9/1/23. So in December of 2023, I sold some of the individual stocks that this person had, and it looks like they were bought on 9/1 and then sold in December. So bought in September, sold in December. That's a short-term gain. And this person would have to pay short-term taxes. And depending on your income, that might be 22 or 24 or 28 or even in the low 30s or upper 30s if you live in California, when the long-term capital gains tax rate for you might have been 15. So do you want to pay 15% or 30% tax on the gains? If it's a few dollars, it doesn't matter. If you sell $50,000 worth of something, all right, an extra 15% is $7,500 in taxes. Am I doing that right? 15,000, yeah. So, is that worth checking? I think it is. So it's just a little rant on cost basis data. No matter where your account is, no matter who the custodian is, you want to make sure that all of the original purchase price data is loaded, is accurate, and definitely is not zero, because then you'll have to pay capital gains or short-term gains on the total value of what you're selling, not just what you made. So make sure your cost basis is not zero, and make sure the purchase date is accurate. And the real big important dividing line is 1 year. So if you buy and sell something in less than 1 year, it's a short-term gain. If you buy and sell after 1 year, it's a long-term gain. So that would only affect things that are bought in the last 12 months or something where Schwab put in 9/1 of 2023. That was the date that they chose. If they had put in 9/1 of 2022, that would artificially make everything be long-term gains, even if they weren't. So, at some point they have to pick a date. I wish they would have picked an older date, but what do I know? So those are things to check on to make sure that you're not paying too much in taxes.
What did this person who made this world intend it for? And this is the point where you think, well, it fits me very well. The caves and the forests and the stream and the mammoths. He must have made it for me. There's no other conclusion you can come to. And it's rather like a puddle waking up one morning I know they don't normally do this, but allow me, I'm a science fiction writer. A puddle wakes up one morning and thinks, this is a very interesting world I find myself in. It fits me very neatly. In fact, it fits me so neatly, I mean, really precise, isn't it? It must have been made to have me in it. And the sun rises, and he's continuing to narrate the story about this hole being made to have him in it. And the sun rises, and gradually the puddle is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time the puddle ceases to exist, it's still thinking, it's still trapped in this idea that the hole was there for it. And if we think the world is here for us, we will continue to destroy it in the way that we've been destroying it.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I just want to take a moment and discuss the idea of having a plan. I have a plan, I have ideas, and you can have a different plan and different ideas, and that's cool. And maybe you do better than I do. That's also very cool. But one of the things that I have to remind people from time to time is that you should have a plan for how you run your investments, and you should stick to that plan. Now, from time to time, my ideas and allocation percentages change, and that's okay. But what I don't want you to do is anything dramatic. I don't want you to make huge adjustments on the fly without thinking about how that might have worked in the past or how that's going to work in the future. And another idea that I like is to have a slightly contrarian philosophy. So the things that aren't doing well, for me, are a little more attractive than the things that are doing really well. Because what can happen is really well can do really well again, or it may not. So I like to take gains from areas that have done really well and redistribute them back into the plan, back to keep everything kind of in balance. And if you want to change the overall balance of things from time to time, that's cool, and you should have a reason for doing that. A couple of topics that have come up in the last few years with COVID and the economic difficulties and the stock market and inflation, things that came up that people ask me about on a regular basis over the last couple years, and they wanted to jump in these things. I have two examples. One of them was TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. I've done full segments on that in the past, and if you wish, I can do that again. If as a part of your overall portfolio, you want to sign up with the government and go to their official website and buy some TIPS, and that's a good fit for you, cool. They can do okay. They can make you a couple percent on average in the long run. But what you did not want to do a couple of years ago was jump into a TIPS ETF. I'm looking at iShares TIPS. The symbol is TIP for this ETF. And what happened in 2022, it became clearer that inflation was going in a downward direction. Prices weren't falling, but the rate of inflation was decreasing. And that made TIPS a lot less valuable. And more importantly, it made a lot of people not want to hold TIPS anymore. So if you got your individual TIPS, they may not be affected. But if you're trading them via an ETF, it is subject to market forces. And there's only so many TIPS out there. So when a lot of people want to have TIPS, the value of those TIPS goes up. When less people want to have the TIPS, the price goes down. Are you following me here? So if you knew in advance that inflation might be a thing in 2019 and 2020 and maybe even into 2021, you could have done really well with a TIPS ETF. However, once it became clear that inflation was here and worse than previously projected, and you bought that at the beginning of 2022, the TIPS fund went down 12.24% in 2022. In 23, it was up almost 4, which was nice, but that minus 12 would have shocked a lot of people who thought, hey, I'm buying something that's a hedge against inflation. And not only did it not go up, it went down by 12%. So are TIPS a reasonable thing for you to have in your portfolio? Maybe. And if that's part of your plan, that's cool. And you should do it all the time. And you should understand that all the time, based on their 10-year record, is that they're going to make 2 to 3 to 4%, maybe. And that's okay. But you don't want to jump in and out and change your allocations because you suddenly go, oh my God, a friend told me that TIPS are the thing to have. Another thing that is in this category of things maybe you don't want to do, commodities. I had a lot of, no, I guess I didn't have a lot. I had a few clients that came to me and said, hey, Phil, you don't have commodities in your plan. I want commodities. Almost all of the people that brought that up, and again, not too many, I talked them out of it because commodities in the long run, and I'm looking at I'm on the Vanguard website. I'm looking at mutual fund VCMDX. You can go look this up yourself. The fund hasn't been around that long, but the nice thing is they have a benchmark. And the average return of the benchmark that they use over the last 10 years is minus 1.11%. So my question is, as a long-run investor, as a long-term investor, why would I want to own something that over the last 10 years has made negative 1%? Now, maybe I want to do that if I think that that's an anomaly and that's underperformance. But commodities, generally speaking, in the very long run, make inflation plus 1% or 2%, just like gold does. And it's called the hedge against inflation, one of the best marketing terms ever created. It means you're only going to make 1 or 2 or 3% above inflation. Okay, fine, but you can do that with stocks. So why take all the volatility with probably realistically a very low long-term return? So last year in 2023, the Vanguard Commodities Fund lost 7.46%. Every category that I use of stocks went up. Now, they can go down. Don't misinterpret me. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have gotten this because it went down. I'm saying you shouldn't have gotten this because everyone else was. So when I get a phone call or an email or I talk to people and they're like, I think I'm going to get a commodities fund because commodities are really hot. That's not the time to buy it. It's just a simple mathematical thing, theory, idea, concept, maybe a concept. Think about commodities as an example. So it follows supply and demand, basic economics 101. When more people want to buy commodities, when it's more than normal, more than average, the price goes up. That's supply and demand. When less people want to own commodities or more people want to sell commodities or commodity funds, the prices go down. Inherent in that concept is that more people are buying at the high price and more people are selling at the low price. I think everyone listening knows you should buy low and sell high, but that's the exact opposite of what most people do. That's why prices can often go up and down. When prices are going up, particularly on an asset that hasn't changed in any meaningful way, when the prices go up, that means the demand is high. That means more people want to buy and fewer people want to sell. And again, the opposite. I'm repeating myself, but the point is it's intrinsic in the very nature of pricing. When those prices are going up, more people are buying them. You're doing it exactly wrong. So If you disagree with my philosophy and you want to have commodities as part of your portfolio on an ongoing long-term basis, cool. You do you, bro. It's fine. You might do better than me. I don't think so in this case, but whatever. If that's what you want to do it. But don't jump into commodities that you've never owned because there's some fear in the marketplace. Because quite honestly, by the time you, Joe Schmo, John Smith, average listener, by the time it comes to your ears that people are doing this, it's probably already too late. And this jumping around, I'm going to do tips for a year. Oh shit, I lost money. Let me do commodities for a year. Oh shit, I lost money. It's something you need to avoid. So make a plan. You can use some of my ideas. You can use a lot of my ideas. You could use none of my ideas. But make a plan, stick to it, and try like hell to avoid thrashing around and really, really make an effort to not put your money into something new because it's hot or trendy. Because you could make a lot of money. Odds are you're going to get burned by jumping around and moving money from one place to another. It's a long-term, sometimes painfully slow process, but you want to make reasonable returns over reasonably long periods of time. At least that's what I want to do. If you want to try to make quick money, cool. Again, different strategy, not one I support, but if that's what you want to do, I don't know why you're listening, because I never support that. But anyway, that's just some ideas about the short-term problems with moving money around and trying to get to what's hot. And just 2 examples in the last couple of years that have not done well if you were late to the party and bought something that was popular. One was tips. The other one is jumping into commodities. I hope that helps provide some rationale for why you shouldn't thrash around and make short-term changes in your long-term plan.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I guess I'm going to have a new category here. This is not a super shitty fund yet, because it's brand new, but I'm going to call it a super stupid fund. I'm getting buried in these emails, and I wish I could get off the list, but whatever. There's a brand new ETF, ladies and gentlemen, and its symbol is MUSC, music. And here are some of the highlights. Chart-topping growth. Goldman Sachs projects a mind-blowing 12% annual growth in the music industry. 12% is mind-blowing growth? Okay, whatever Goldman Sachs says. Who gives a fuck? Big name opportunities. So this ETF is going to buy shares in companies that have something to do with the music industry. And to top it off, things like Amazon and Apple. Because, yeah, they do trade in a lot of music. So, but you already own them somewhere else in your portfolio because they're almost impossible to avoid. Then let's see what this says. Beyond the charts, music's value is skyrocketing. Experts predict a $50 billion global copyright value by 2024. By 2024, this email came to me in 2024. So by the beginning of 2024, so it's skyrocketed or it's skyrocketing. I don't know. I mean, they're just throwing shit at you. Get your backstage pass. Ooh, what do I get? With MUSQ, you don't need VIP access to the music industry. This ETF is your convenient liquid ticket to the hottest music companies, from streaming giants to tech innovators shaping the future of sound. So it says get your backstage pass, but you don't get one. Okay, so cool. And I was going to let it go, but then I got another one. Let's see, what does this one say? Global music industry hits highest note in 2023. Who cares what happened in 2023? Dominance of streaming, music downloads. Ooh, Taylor Swift. And they talk about how much money is pouring into their fund. And they gave a link. Let's see, do I have that open? Maybe not. Oh, fund summary. You can find this if you really want it. Number of holdings, 42 companies. Management fee, 0.89. Not ridiculously high, but why when you can get an index fund for a lot less? Total operating expenses, 0.78. And there's asterisks. That probably means that it's currently discounted and it will be higher later. And they have their 1 month and 3 month results. And they can't give you anything more than that because this thing started in August. So they don't have 6 months of data yet. Oh, and here's the full list. Let's see. Alphabet, Amazon, Apple are 25%. Sony, Universal, Spotify, anything that Live Nation, anything that has to do with music or artists or whatever. It's just stupid. Why would you do this? How much it's trading at a premium or a discount, who cares? Because it's an ETF. So quick reminder, for an ETF, you don't pay what it's actually worth. It's traded on the market and you can pay more or less than it's technically worth as of that day. So just something that's coming to me. It's stupid. Why would you do this? I don't know. But anyway, thought I'd share it with you just to give you another fun little look into the crap that I see. Well, hopefully you found something informative, educational, helpful in this episode. I'm delighted that you're here, of course. Quick little closing comments. The first thing that pops in my head is an earlier segment where I was talking about long-term, short-term gains and the problems that might have come up in a transfer from TD Ameritrade to Schwab. Keep in mind that only affects investments in taxable accounts, like an individual account or a joint account. None of that applies. I mean, you can still look at it. It could still be wrong, but it doesn't matter. None of that matters or is significant or meaningful with inside of a 401k, a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, because they're different rules. And the taxes that you pay or don't pay aren't based on the prices that you paid. They're based on the amount of money that you take out and when you take out and what you have to take out and that kind of stuff, particularly for an IRA. So it doesn't matter. But if you have generous money in a taxable account, double check whether it's at Schwab or anywhere else. If you've ever bought stocks or cobbled together investments from different places over different times, you want to make sure that everything that you own has a reasonably accurate cost basis and has accurate and detailed dates for when each lot, each individual batch of shares was purchased. It's really important. You don't want to find out that it's messed up after you sell. That's a lot harder to fix. You can still fix it, but it's just more work. Anywho, I'm going to go back. I'm now watching, I think it's on Disney Plus, Percy Jackson. So I'm watching that in Spanish to practice Spanish. And I just finished all of Stargate Atlantis in Spanish. I was actually thinking I was going to watch Stargate SG-1, but I can't find anywhere where it's been dubbed into Spanish. And my comprehension is pretty reasonable. And I think that's mostly because of all the Italian I know. So Spanish is got a lot of similarities with Italian. So that helps an awful lot. One thing that I did think that was interesting with the Stargate Atlantis, they had this big booming voice in Spanish that would read the title of each episode. So if the episode was Deep in Space, it would come on and say the title in Spanish. It would also say the title of the show in Spanish, which really cracked me up almost every episode when it started, because this big booming voice would read the title of the name of the show and it would go, Stargate Atlantis, in Spanish. That was the Spanish version. I just did it for you. So that cracked me up because it sounds just like someone saying in English. So I guess they don't have a Spanish word for Stargate or Atlantis. So the Spanish narrator would just go Stargate, Atlantis in Spanish. I don't know. Maybe you don't find that hysterical. Crack me the fuck up. Anyway, once again, thank you for listening. My little cold that I told you I got from the cruise is wearing me out, man. So I'm going to wrap this up. Maybe go get some albuterol, rest a little bit, watch Percy Jackson. And if you got show ideas or topics you want me to cover, let me know. And I hope to see you out there on the road sometime soon. Until then, ciao.